Unbelievable! Lithuania is taking a shocking step. The border with Belarus has been closed all because of a mysterious weapon. The government is declaring a state of emergency and the army is preparing to shoot down unidentified objects. Lithuania's prime minister is taking a tough stance. Air balloons, the border, Minsk's hysteria, the situation is on the edge. What is happening between Lithuania and Belarus and why is all of Europe on edge? All the details right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Solomia Dolik and here are the latest events. Lithuania's unexpected move. The border with Belarus is closed, and it's all because of the meta balloons. Yes, you heard that right. The Lithuanian government has made an unprecedented decision. The border with Belarus is completely closed for an indefinite period, after a series of incidents involving unidentified meta balloons, which crossed into Lithuanian airspace. Lithuanian Prime Minister Inga Ruginiene stated that the country's security comes above all else. Starting Monday, the Lithuanian army has been put on high alert. The military has been ordered to shoot down any suspicious objects, even using kinetic means if necessary. In other words, a literal hunt for these mysterious objects has been declared.
Last week, we already decided to toughen criminal liability, so smugglers shouldn't expect that their responsibility will depend on the number of cigarettes involved. Cases will be consolidated, and damages caused to airports will also be recovered.
However, she did not specify what measures would be taken to shoot down the balloons that have flown into Latvia.
I definitely won't go into details regarding kinetic means, as this is confidential information. But the military has already prepared an action plan, and it will operate strictly according to the algorithm. The algorithm was developed by the military. The balloons will be shot down. And
while the army prepares to intercept the balloons, the government is not standing still. The Prime Minister has already announced a new package of domestic changes. Even harsher penalties for smuggling. A draft amendment to the criminal code has been submitted to the same. It provides for the highest and most severe punishment, imprisonment.
Previously, we talked about fines and their increase, but today we've already discussed that this could also include imprisonment. And
now attention. Could the meta eyes really trigger NATO? Lithuania is officially considering invoking Article 4 of the alliance due to provocations from Belarus. The Prime Minister of Latvia stated that the situation with the balloons coming from Belarusian territory has gone beyond an ordinary incident. And now Vilnius does not rule out the possibility. Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty may be invoked. The Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already begun coordinating with European partners, preparing an additional package of sanctions against Belarus, and is simultaneously consulting with allies regarding the possible activation of Article 4.
This will be done in the near future. Active negotiations and communication are also underway with our allies and neighbors, Poland and Latvia. All of our actions are also coordinated with them. We are not a separate state. We are part of NATO and the EU. Everything we do, we coordinate with them.
And while Lithuania is preparing for the possible invocation of NATO Article 4, the situation inside the country is intensifying. It's literally in the air. In Vilnius, there is a ground transportation collapse and an air raid alert. Lithuania has temporarily suspended operations at the capital's airport and closed 2 border crossings with Belarus. The reason is the same helium weather balloons that have been coming in from Belarusian territory for the second day in a row. Lithuania is not only defending itself from the air, but also tightening control on the ground. New rules against smuggling, but likely also a signal. There will be no more favors for any neighbors. Meanwhile, there's hysteria in Minsk. The Belarusian Foreign Ministry has already lodged a protest. They called Lithuania's actions a provocation and a fabricated pretext for escalation. And against this backdrop, the Kremlin is once again trying to flex its muscles. Putin is a threat not only to Ukraine, but to all of Europe. A symbolic incident. The Latvian Foreign Ministry refused to allow a plane carrying the Russian dictator to fly through its airspace. And almost immediately after that, a new provocation from the Kremlin. What is behind these actions and what is Moscow preparing for? All the details coming up next.
Representatives of a NATO country, particularly in Europe. In small countries, they need to carefully realize what they're playing with.
After Ukraine, the Baltics, When
Russian people are unjustly being thrown out in large numbers across the border. These are very serious matters that directly affect the security of our country.
Vladimir Putin is a threat not only to the security of Ukraine, but also to other independent states. The Latvian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has officially denied permission for a plane carrying Putin to fly through its airspace. This decision is not just a diplomatic gesture. It is a direct reminder to the Kremlin that, in the civilized world, Putin is the subject of a Hague court warrant. And immediately after this, the Kremlin launched a new provocation. Russian military aircraft violated Lithuanian airspace. NATO fighter jets were scrambled to intercept them.
This is a blatant violation of international law and of territorial integrity of Lithuania. This once again confirms the importance of strengthening the readiness of European air defense forces.
Before this, Russian fighter jets were over Estonia. 2 more aircraft of the Russian Federation appeared over the Petro-Baltic oil platform in the Baltic Sea. Russia has stepped up provocations against NATO countries in September. The Kremlin systematically employs hybrid forms of aggression.
In 3 months, Russia produces as much ammunition as all NATO countries combined in a year. We expect the Russian military-industrial complex to produce 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles, and 200 missiles this year. Iskander. And in just 5 years, Russia may be ready to go to war against NATO.
For Putin, the capture of Ukraine is not the goal, but just a stage. His plans involve resurrecting the Soviet sphere of influence, where the independence of neighboring countries is only a temporary misunderstanding.
It was simply a misunderstanding. In the country of Estonia, the percentage is 75.22%, while in the neighboring country of Latvia, the figure stands at 70.6%.
In addition to military provocations, the Russians carry out various cyber attacks.
Estonia plans to increase its military spending to 5.4% of GDP over the next 4 years. And right now, Estonia is already strengthening its border with our country.
Russia can come up with hundreds of pretexts for invasion. The Kremlin has already found familiar narratives for the Baltic countries to justify its invasion. In fact,
it really can be called fascism when the authorities who hold significant power and influence do everything possible to ensure and enforce forced assimilation. This includes the assimilation not only of ethnic Russians, but also of various other peoples and minority groups, all of whom are subjected to these policies. Therefore, of course, everything that is happening now in Latvia is a tragedy. In fact, the same enemies are there.
They openly declare the liberation of brotherly peoples, the granting of additional rights and freedoms, as well as support for Russian speakers. And already today, in the narratives of Kremlin propaganda, Narva is portrayed as a city where Russians are actively oppressed by Estonians.
The Russian language is not offered as such, not even as an option. And that's why I'm changing jobs, moving to an Orthodox gymnasium where they preserve the Russian language and culture.
The Kremlin has already outlined plans to increase military production and deploy additional troops along the border. Along their borders, writes the Institute for the Study of War.
Kremlin officials continue to use the same narratives against the Baltic countries that Russia has used to justify its invasions of former Soviet republics over the past 3 decades.
The Kremlin continues to chase phantoms. The next target could be the Moscow-Kaliningrad passenger train, which passes through Lithuanian territory. The Kremlin is quite capable of using it as a pretext for invasion, supposedly to rescue peaceful. They could also stage a provocation in the Suwałki corridor on the border between Lithuania and Poland.
This enclave is a real trap for Russia. The shortest supply route for the troops is by land through Polish territory near the city of Suwałki. In the West, it is believed that in the event of war, Russia will definitely want to break through at this spot, a corridor to supply the Kaliningrad region.
In Putin's worldview, not only the Baltic countries and Ukraine should submit to Russia, but also part of Poland and Finland.
If Russia really wants to seize the Baltic states, it will have to do it very quickly. The threatened period, which usually precedes a war, would need to be shortened as much as possible in order not to reveal their intentions.
Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are concerned about Russia's increasing military spending. That is why they are developing a plan for the mass evacuation of their million-strong population in the event of a Russian invasion. At the same time, they firmly believe that NATO's Article 5 will still work.
We've been having this conversation since February 2022, or even since March 2014, when Russia first attacked Ukraine and annexed Crimea. The US is no longer willing to defend Europe, as I say, for free. They want Europeans to do their part of the job. I think that's fair. Of course, it's not easy because it means having to cut spending. For example, less funding goes to education, healthcare, and social security. But we, as a frontline state, we understand what's at stake. And coming back to Article 5, people often mention the Budapest Memorandum and compare Ukraine and NATO guarantees. But there is a difference, and it's a very significant one. Ukraine is not a member of the alliance, and what Russia, yes, Russia's fierce opposition to Ukraine joining NATO and receiving Article 5 guarantees, is, for me, precisely the proof. Article 5 works.
The scenario of a sudden strike on the alliance's eastern flank is no longer a fantasy. It has become a matter of time and of the West's readiness to respond. Latvia has tightened its immigration rules. Those Russians who failed the exam because they did not submit their documents for EU permanent resident status on time in Latvia are required to leave the country. In addition, starting from November 1st, it will be prohibited to carry out irregular bus passenger transportation from Latvia to Russia and Belarus. At the border with Russia, the restoration of swamps and peatlands will begin to create a natural barrier in case of aggression. For now, NATO remains confident that an open conflict with Russia can be avoided, at least as long as the Kremlin is preoccupied with the war against Ukraine. However, history teaches us what seemed impossible yesterday may become reality today.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
After Latvia refused to allow Putin's plane to land in the Kremlin, an explosion of discussion, but an even greater shock was caused by Minsk's position. Belarus started talking about peace, dialogue with Kyiv, and even praised the United States. Minsk is hitting the brakes and Putin no longer sees Lukashenko as an ally. It seems the West has managed to pressure Lukashenko, and now he is playing his own dangerous game. But how long will he be able to maintain this fragile balance? Let's take a look.
There has been some positive momentum in the trend of resuming the Belarusian-American dialogue. It's time to say something about this matter. Lukashenko is doing everything he can to sit on two chairs at once. Volodymyr Lysenkovich needs to calm down. There is a good proposal on the table. For a long time, he was considered one of Putin's most loyal allies. Unexpectedly, he began to show openness to contacts with the US. Yes, interesting pauses. With an image of the White House. But I'll try not to be in debt for long.
Journalists write that he is looking for a way out of the isolation into which Putin dragged him. So he has intensified contacts with the European Union. Washington, despite the European Union, has begun engaging with Belarus, sending several delegations to Minsk this year.
And everything has to be fair, just like when we once made agreements with the Americans.
Minsk took advantage of the open window, the opportunity. Lukashenko eagerly tried to regain at least some trust from the Americans. Putin's staunch ally started praising Trump.
Trump deserved that Nobel Prize. It should have been given to him. Trump did a lot for the world.
In September, he had a phone conversation with Donald Trump and even called him a respected leader. Of course, the Belarusian dictator is hoping to achieve at least a partial lifting of Western sanctions.
The only issue with the president of Iran is the sanctions. This is a time of opportunity. It is very important for us not to waste this time.
Lukashenko understands that Iran and Africa are not helpers, and Putin's money is running out. Lukashenko has sent a signal that he is ready to talk with Volodymyr Zelensky.
Our position is that it is necessary to meet, and even in this more difficult situation, to find consensus. This work is also underway. Of course, a lot depends on this. Our president is doing everything possible to stabilize
the situation. In recent weeks, Belarusian diplomats have reportedly been actively holding a series of meetings with European representatives. In Brussels, this gesture was seen as Lukashenko's attempt to climb out of the sanctions pit and return to international trade.
Let's try to work out a truly global deal, as Mr. Trump likes to say, a big deal. That's what he calls it.
Journalists report that it is Yuri Ambrazevich, appointed as Belarus's ambassador to the Vatican, who is actually coordinating Minsk's contacts with Western Europe. He conveyed a message to European diplomats that Belarus seeks to break out of political isolation. And supposedly it is ready to play the role of mediator between Russia and Ukraine.
That is why, for us, a sovereign, independent Ukraine is a major fundamental issue. It should be peaceful, not create any problems or threats for anyone, and develop as an independent state. We support this, we are for peace, and in this regard we are ready to work. Belarus, as a close ally of Russia in resolving the Ukrainian crisis and in building the regional security architecture, is, as I have already said, assigned a certain role. The Americans have noticed us in this process.
Europe is reacting cautiously to Lukashenko's convulsions, knowing that the mustachioed one likes to play a double game.
Action needs to be taken because no matter what, Russia is making steady progress on the front. I say this responsibly, since I observe it every day, in fact. And this could lead to losses to Ukraine as a state.
European diplomats acknowledge that Minsk is trying to demonstrate independence from Moscow, but most believe that Lukashenko does not have real independence. Recently, the Belarusian authorities once again arrested several opposition members. And at the same time, it held joint military exercises with Russia.
We are not trying to conquer anyone because we know perfectly well that we can't conquer anyone. There are powerful states around us, but there is also an unpleasant threat. We are always ready to strike if someone sets foot on our land.
For show, they supposedly invited American soldiers to the West 2025 exercise.
Thank you.
While telling the US about his peaceful intentions, Lukashenko is playing into Putin's hands. For example, he suggests building a nuclear power plant in eastern Belarus to supply electricity to the Ukrainian territories temporarily occupied by the Kremlin.
If a decision is made, we will immediately start building a new power unit or a new plant. We'll build it. If such a need arises, it will be in Western Russia and in the liberated regions. That's what the government believes.
the issue of funding doesn't even come up.
Lukashenko is like a seasoned card sharp. He flirts with the West without letting go of the Kremlin's hand that feeds him.
You said that the Americans asked you to pass a message to Moscow. Is there something like that this time?
Is there? I'll pass on all the messages and stories to him tomorrow.
Such maneuvers by Minsk, trying to please both sides, usually end with one of the chairs breaking. How do you assess these actions? Share your opinion in the comments. Hit the like button under the video and follow the main news with me. There's more to come. See you in the next segment.